Thank you for being here. Thanks for the support. And please remember, we're trying to make this sculpture right here, okay, 7 feet tall, okay, and put this someplace in the most prominent traveled place we can find. Chris is an archival producer and researcher. His first exposure to Nat Colley came when he started with the Center for Sacramento History as a volunteer. When the Colleys, when Al and Ola donated the Colley family papers over there, it inspired him to create a short documentary called The Time Is Now. And that became a PBS nationally celebrated documentary about Nat's life that was Emmy nominated. Since then, he produced Desegregating Sacramento, which was screened here last year. So that's Chris's roots and his passion for Nathaniel Colley's life, which I share with him on a very profound basis.
So I want to start by just sharing all the love with everybody who put me in front of you here today. 13 years ago, in March of 2012, at the Center for Sacramento History, the day that the city and the center celebrated the gift of the Colley papers. So I certainly would like to thank the Colley family for donating all of his papers, because if it weren't for this day, I wouldn't be here and maybe we wouldn't be here, because this set me at least on a path that produced many, many programs. And so I'd like to thank the center for backing me on this journey and allowing me to use their archival materials to produce these programs for them and for the city, and also a thank you to KVIE for broadcasting them and then syndicating them across the country twice. And so I want to start by showing the first film clip that we got digitized all those years ago, because it sets the tone for what we're going to be talking about in Nathaniel Colley's fight for fair housing.
First, we're going to have to lay the facts on the line about the existence of discrimination in housing. We're going to have to educate the public to the fact that it is an existing thing, which is a real problem. All fair housing does is try to make housing available to all people on an economic basis without regard to race, color, or creed. It seems to me this is fundamental in the American system.
So that was in 1966. 25 years before Nathaniel Colley spoke those words, this was Nathaniel Colley at Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. He was a chemistry student whose teacher was Dr. George Washington Carver, one of our most famous scientists. In fact, he was president of the Carver Chemical Society. And if you look on the top row, the third person from the left is his wife-to-be, Geraldine Jackson, that he met. She's the one from Sacramento who would later convince Nathaniel to move to Sacramento. Something happened that prevented him from becoming a superstar chemist, and that was World War II. Nathaniel was called to service because of his experience in chemistry. He was the captain of an all-black chemical company where he experienced quite a bit of racism.
You will never know how much trouble it gave me to lead a black company in the Solomon Islands and in the Philippine Islands and in New Guinea, and people would ask me, why are all the people in your company black? And I also recognized the segregations and the evils of it. And I determined at that time that something had to be done about this. And so I made the bold move of deciding to go to law school.
And that law school turned out to be Yale. He wanted to go to the University of Alabama, but was denied due to his race, and so the state of Alabama paid for Nathaniel Colley's education at Yale. So Nathaniel's experience during the war cannot be overestimated. And he was a patriot, and at the end of the day, he gave his life for this country because the chemicals he was exposed to during the war quite likely caused the brain cancer that took his life in the 1990s. In an oral history many years later, he talked about this whole notion of black veterans fighting for this country only to return to find out that all the goodies that the government was handing out, thanking everybody for saving the world, weren't available to him.
The war itself was an awakening experience for America. There were a lot of GIs who'd been overseas and they'd seen the world. Very difficult to go over and fight for freedom for other people and come back home and accept a kind of slavery for yourself.
Tell me what kinds of conditions that you found in Sacramento?
When I came to Sacramento, there were many business establishments in Sacramento which would not serve blacks. The only blacks that worked for the city worked in the waste removal. There were no clerical or other occupations with the city. There was widespread discrimination in housing.
He mentioned the housing problem. What happened when he went to look for a job? He had the same problem. He tried to apply for a job with the state of California.
I went to Sacramento to the personnel board. Now, this is the state of California. It took me 15 minutes to convince the clerk to give me the form so I could sit for the examination. She kept saying to me, well, you realize this is for people who graduated from law school. I can read, I know that. I graduated from law school. My degree is written in Latin, and I guarantee you couldn't read it. She finally gave me the form. In fact, she sort of threw it at me and said, here it is, but it'll do you no good. I had no idea how prophetic she was. Because I sat for the examination. I was number one on the list statewide. But nobody would hire me. One of them asked me, what would you look like representing the state of California? I said, I'd look like a lawyer, I guess. What would you expect me to look like? I did get a job with the state. And my job, that summer after law school, with my Yale degree written in Latin, was in the textbook warehouse as a stock clerk, where I wasn't allowed to write on the box where the books were to go. All I could do was put the books in the box and nail it up, and a white young fellow who had not graduated from high school, because he told me so, would write the name of the school district where the books would be shipped. Now, you do that to a person, you think that you get over that? Oh no. But instead of getting angry, I decided to get even. I was going to use the system so that others wouldn't face that problem. Because somebody has to be the warrior out front.
And so Nathaniel Colley was that warrior out front. He went out on his own, and he became the first African-American member of the Sacramento Bar Association and the first practicing African-American lawyer in the city's history. Nathaniel's first housing case was the New Helvetia public housing case. The Sacramento Public Housing Authority was segregating all of its black residents on one street, and there were only 16 of the 310 units that were available to minorities. Nathaniel Colley got an injunction that prevented that practice, and that was the first case of its kind involving public housing. This is an article from the Pittsburgh Courier reporting on that. The first sentence of that article says, housing bias was dealt a stunning blow here Friday by the NAACP when the local authority agreed to integrate families in the government's large Sacramento development. That's a very important component of race relations, not only in Sacramento history, but American history. And the New Helvetia housing complex is now on the National Register of Historic Places for its role in the civil rights movement and for its association with Nathaniel Colley. Now, the suburbs. The building of the suburbs, all the millions of homes that were built around the country in the post-war era that were all insured by the Veterans Administration or the Federal Housing Authority.
Our housing problems have been largely created by the United States government, by official policy. Let me tell you what I mean. Most of the expansion into the suburbs came through SHS insurance or Veterans Administration guarantees. Both the FHA and the Veterans Administration, up until 1951, required a racially restricted covenant on every piece of land on which they insured the house. What result did we get? Since if they required the restrictive covenants, that was the same as requiring racial segregation. And the FHA required it, and the FHA goes to white suburbia America. And of course, then they say, why all these black folks like to congregate in the ghetto? Why do they like to congregate in the city, in the inner cities? We congregate because we like a roof over our head. And for years, that was the only place we could find one.
So what is he talking about right there? Here we go. Attention veterans, best buy in town, $25 down. These developers were basically giving homes away, but they were only available to whites, because right here in the middle of this, you see the fine print there, it says restricted district. Here's the West Sacramento Land Company. Look up top. These homes will go to GI or FHA financing, restricted district. Here's the subdivision that Nathaniel Colley and his family wound up integrating, Southland Park. And if you look halfway down, right below where it says located just south of William Land Park, there it says restricted continually. Here's FHA 90% in restricted East Sacramento, restricted Elmhurst, restricted near McClellan Air Force Base, restricted Curtis Park, restricted Land Park, restricted Arden Park, restricted River Park. So what did Nathaniel Colley do?
I know my wife and I sought housing, but most places just flatly refused to rent to us. One result was that we filed a lawsuit against a number of developers called Ming, M-I-N-G versus Horgan. The theory of the lawsuit was that these developers were getting the benefits of the FHA insurance system and the Veterans Administration's guarantee system. And since they were getting federal benefits, we allege in our lawsuit that they had an obligation to provide housing facilities to all without discrimination on the basis of race, color, or creed.
So that's the Sacramento Outlook, the predecessor of the Sacramento Observer. This is 1954, May 21st. Now notice, this is the same week that the Brown versus Board of Education came down. But if you look at the top of the newspaper, this case that Nathaniel Colley filed was so important that it actually overshadows the segregation in public schools unconstitutional, says Supreme Court subheadline. Who was the attorney in that case for Brown versus Board of Education? It was Thurgood Marshall. This is the day that they won that case, the same week that that housing case here in Sacramento was filed. And the reason that I bring him up is because right as our housing case was filed, back east in Philadelphia, they filed a similar case. If anybody's heard of Levittown in Pennsylvania, this is William Levitt, the world's largest builder of homes. And this particular development was 17,000 homes, and it was for whites only, even as he was getting these federal benefits. So, who was the attorney for the NAACP in that case? Thurgood Marshall, the same guy as Brown versus Board of Education the year before. Now, Thurgood Marshall had argued 32 cases before the High Court, winning 29 of them. But in this case, Thurgood Marshall lost. The judge in that case, he didn't buy the argument that this developer, this William Levitt, this private developer, was now suddenly a state actor because he was getting these federal benefits. Well, out here in Sacramento, they knew about that decision and what that might have meant. January 1957, there's the old Sacramento County Courthouse at 8th and I Streets. There's the courtroom. There's Nathaniel Colley in that courthouse, and this is the final arguments of that Ming versus Horgan case.
Colley approached the judge and made sure that he heard and understood the importance and gravity of what this particular decision would mean. And that quote states, "One who dips his hand into the pocket of the federal treasury must not complain if a little democracy clings to it."
James Oakley was a Superior Court judge. He ruled in our favor that whoever receives public money must practice non-discrimination. And that was the first case in America which held that the mere receipt of public funds made it mandatory that there be no discrimination.
One who dips his hand into the pocket of the federal treasury must not complain if a little democracy clings to it. That needs to be in granite somewhere, because that became the classic way to describe all discrimination where federal funds are involved. And this is when Nathaniel Colley started striking up a relationship with John F. Kennedy. He had tried to get President Eisenhower to sign an executive order banning this kind of discrimination in housing, but Eisenhower wouldn't do it. As 1959 rolled around, Nathaniel Colley started supporting Kennedy. So in his statement of support, he concludes it at the bottom, "We know that Jack Kennedy will see to it that every hand which dips into the federal treasury will come out with a beautiful coating of democracy indelibly clinging to it."
That I have today signed an executive order directing federal departments and agencies to take every proper and legal action to prevent discrimination in the sale or lease of housing facilities owned or operated by the federal government, housing constructed or sold as a result of loans or grants to be made by the federal government, or by loans to be insured or guaranteed by the federal government. It is neither proper nor equitable that Americans should be denied the benefits of housing owned by the federal government, or financed through the federal assistance on the basis of their race, color, creed, or national origin.
While this was all going on, John F. Kennedy creates a commission to study discrimination in the armed forces. And who does he name to that committee? Nathaniel Colley. This is that committee. This is a photo from the Oval Office in the White House, January 1963. A little bit later that year, Mr. and Mrs. Colley were invited to a state dinner, and there they are in the receiving line at the White House. After the dinner, Mrs. Colley wrote a very lovely thank you note to Jackie Kennedy, thanking her for a wonderful dinner. A month after that state dinner, President Kennedy urgently called Nathaniel Colley to the White House to, quote, discuss certain aspects of the nation's civil rights problem. This is June 15th, 1963. This is the actual meeting of the attorneys. There were 240 attorneys from around the country, only 5 from California. And this meeting took place on the same day, June 21st, 1963, that the California legislature actually passed a fair housing bill to cover all housing. So Nathaniel Colley was riding high at this point. He found fortune and fame in the West in 1963, but he could have never imagined the tragedy that he would experience both personally and professionally just a few months later when the president was assassinated. Not even 2 days after the assassination, he wrote this article, "He Killed Our Lincoln," for the Sacramento Observer. It's a brilliant piece of writing. I would encourage you to take pictures of it. The other tragedy, in the days and weeks leading up to the Kennedy assassination, the California Real Estate Association began a drive to repeal the state's Fair Housing Act. That was Proposition 14, that, if passed, would place a constitutional amendment into the state constitution allowing racial discrimination. That proposition passed by a 2-to-1 margin in the election of 1964. So this is a devastating blow for anybody who was in favor of civil rights or open housing, especially Nathaniel Colley.
The NAACP, whom I represent, is preparing at this present time a suit to be filed in the state Supreme Court directing the Secretary of State and the state printer not to take any action to include Proposition 14 as a part of the state constitution. Until Proposition 14 is declared unconstitutional, I think you'll see a return of the ads in the newspapers, restricted or unrestricted, and this has always meant Negroes and others allowed or not. We will see a return of the exclusive neighborhoods where people will be excluded on the basis of race or color. This is inevitable. This was the purpose of it.
And this is the first case that was filed to test the constitutionality of that proposition.
What do you think chances are that they'll make the decision you think ought to be made?
I've always thought that the chances of that were very, very good. I've never felt as confident about a lawsuit in all my life as I feel about this one.
So Nathaniel Colley was one of the attorneys who argued that case that wound its way all the way up to the California Supreme Court. And the California Supreme Court agreed with him, and Proposition 14 was then ruled unconstitutional. The real estate people didn't like that, though, so they appealed that to the United States Supreme Court, which affirmed the California Supreme Court's decision. And the next year, in 1968, at a testimonial dinner in his honor in Sacramento, Nathaniel Colley was hailed as Mr. Civil Rights of California. 20 years later, in 1988, Nathaniel Colley received only the second honorary doctorate ever bestowed on anyone from Sacramento State. And so I'd like to close my portion of today's program by letting Nathaniel Colley tell this story that he also told to the graduates at Sac State.
I was in Japan as a representative of the President of the United States. John Kennedy sent me to Japan to see what was happening to black troops, see how they were treated, whether they were really discriminated against. And I found that they were. But in Japan, I was met by admirals and generals, and everybody wanted to curry favor because they knew that I represented the president. I even was put up in a special hotel. They call it a VIP hotel where nobody could stay except big shots. I even had a Japanese houseboy. The Japanese houseboy had to bring me the newspaper. And it was a little newspaper printed in English. I think it was the Tokyo Times, printed in English. He handed me the newspaper. And on the front page was a German Shepherd dog. Looked like he was swallowing the minister's hand in Birmingham. And when Will Collins put the dog on, and that picture is in my mind now. The German Shepherd dog had the man and the minister by the arm, looked like he was going to swallow it. In his broken English, the Japanese houseboy said to me, "You go Birmingham, put the dog on you too." I knew that if I go Birmingham, put the dog on me too. And for that reason, you can take it from me as a certainty. I'll never quit until they put the dog on nobody. Thank you.
I'd really like to thank you so much for honoring my father and recognizing what my parents did for Sacramento and for California. Now, my parents met at Tuskegee, and Dad was a chemist. He was studying to be a chemist, but Dr. Carver told him he would never be a chemist because he talked too much. So that dream never really formulated in his head. And also, he was experimenting up there in Armstrong Hall and blew out the windows a couple of times. But that was him. And when he got to be a senior, the students complained about the food. So they had a strike. He led it. And some people got kicked out of school, but they didn't kick Dad out because he was supposed to be the valedictorian. This is 1941, okay? But they punished him by not letting him be the valedictorian. He didn't get that recognition, but he didn't get kicked out of school. He got drafted shortly after that, and Mom and Dad married in 1942. My mother is the one that encouraged teaching and education because that's what she had studied at Tuskegee. But when she came home, she couldn't get a job because of who she was. And that stuck with her all her life. She never got a chance to use her degree because what they did when Dad couldn't get a job, they decided they were going to go out on their own. And she was the secretary, receptionist, and all-around person while he visited with clients. And their office, they had 3 rooms over a dry cleaner on 4th and L, where Macy's building is. That's where he started. And in these 3 rooms, Dad would talk to the clients. And so they're trying to run a business, and they have these 3 little girls. But my mother was always right there with him. They were quite a team, and some of his later cases were because she felt something was wrong, and he pursued it. So the typing and everything, she did everything like that for him. And as far as the archives and all this that you see, she saved it. She saved it. And when she passed away, I did not know what to do with it. And my friend came to visit me, Janet Ledoux, and she's written a book about California governor's wives. So she said, "Ola, let's go to the Center for History. They probably know what to do." And that started all of this. So I just want to thank all of you again. Now, next, this is my husband. He's got some things to add to everything.
I think everything has been said, but I want to add a few things about my father-in-law. Keep the faith, keep the dream alive. And those are the things that Mr. Colley sort of instilled in me as I worked for him for 5 years. He was a magnificent leader. I learned a lot from him, and he wrote several papers, and 2 of them were mentioned tonight. But Greg enjoys He Killed Our Lincoln, and I just happen to have a full copy of that. And I don't want to take, my wife said don't talk too long, so I'll try to skip to the better parts. Last spring, I was in his office at the White House as a member of a committee he had appointed to study equality of opportunity in the armed forces. My son, 7 years old, had his picture in the Crisis magazine, and the boy had autographed his photo and sent it to the president by me. At first, I could not bring myself to the point of offering the magazine to Mr. Kennedy. Having been tipped off by his efficient personal secretary that I had something for him, he thought my son wanted him to autograph the photo of the magazine. But I told him that it was my son's autograph, which he had sent as a gift. The president was so delighted and surprised that he burst into laughter and on the spot wrote my son a little note of thanks. He said, "I must meet a boy who sends his autograph to the president." Afterwards, everyone was relaxed, and we could proceed with the business at hand, realizing that while John F. Kennedy was president of the United States, he was also a friendly, warm, and wonderful human being. On another occasion, in May of this year, my wife and I were guests at the formal state dinner in the White House in honor of the Grand Duchess of Luxembourg. Even though the names of the other guests read like a who's who in America, the first family was still the main attraction. After dinner, as the guests socialized and got acquainted, they surged around the president and Mrs. Kennedy, much like any average citizen would do. We were flattered beyond words when he came over and not only greeted us, but called out to his wife, who was a few feet away, "Jackie, come over and meet my friends from California." "Jackie," he said, "this is Mr. and Mrs. Nat Colley. Nat served as one of my committeemen. We hope to use him more." Whenever I heard his voice or saw him on television, a great feeling of pride surged through me. Not only because my friend was speaking, but mainly because I knew his was a voice that spoke for men everywhere who yearn for freedom and human dignity without regard to race, creed, or color. When this man spoke, America sang its most beautiful anthem. They killed Lincoln because they hated his ideas. God gave us another Lincoln, and 100 years later, they killed him too. But in the larger sense, each still lives and each still grows with the years. They must not have died in vain. Yes, they killed our Lincoln, but in the martyrdom, we still hope, pray, and work for a new birth of freedom in our time.
Now, I'd like to introduce our artist, Ronald McDowell. Dr. McDowell is a native of Oakland and grew up in Pittsburgh, California. He was a child prodigy who started sketching at the age of 11 months. After graduating high school, he moved to San Francisco and then Los Angeles, where he was embraced by the Motown Records community. There, he became close friends with Michael Jackson and was his personal art teacher for 12 years and a consultant on the Thriller album. In 1986, he moved to Alabama, where he has been commissioned to honor and memorialize revered individuals in statue form or fine art paintings. In 2006, he was awarded an honorary doctorate by the University of West Alabama. His works are displayed in top galleries all over the world and collected by numerous celebrities and others who appreciate fine art. His artwork has been featured at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., as well as the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute in Alabama. The video you're about to see will showcase several of his pieces, as well as highlight 3 of his iconic statues in Birmingham. He will also share what inspired him to memorialize Nathaniel Colley.
You know, when I was coming here, I had offers to sing for record companies. I had offers to model, offers to act. But I thought that art was so important in the African American community that I was willing to sacrifice all my other talents that God had endowed me with for the arts, for the visual arts, for the paintings, the sculpturings. Art is important because it tells a story of who we are, and it tells a story of who I am, and it tells that story for time indefinite because people treasure art. I treasure art. I love other artists' work. It inspires me still today. And I made those sacrifices for that reason, that I wanted my art to be the most important thing in the legacy that I can leave behind. I hope that with my work, that people will look at the work that the artists are doing, the contemporary artists that are doing in my day and age, and say these were artists also, and they were great artists. And I hope that my artwork leaves a legacy for people to understand who I was and who the people around me were, and what affected my life and my culture, and helped to shape me as the artist that I have become. I did the Foot Soldier in Cali Ingram Park in Birmingham, the Civil Rights Park. It allowed me, or it opened the door for me to share my talent, my God-given gift with people from all over the world who come to visit the Civil Rights Park in Birmingham. And the experience that I got from it was learning more about what Black people experienced in the 60s, especially the children, when they were faced against hoses and fierce dogs and police officers and clubs. It put me in a whole different frame of mind where I was more aware of what these people experienced and what the Black children experienced in those days. So, and to be asked by Mayor Arrington in the city of Birmingham to create the statue from a photograph, to me, it was an honor. And it did a whole lot to help my career, to boost my career. Because it's been seen and it's shown in everything dealing with the Black cause and civil rights, from Eyes on the Prize to the Oprah Winfrey special on Condoleezza Rice and Spike Lee's documentary movie on the 4 little girls. And it showed every day for 5 years on any day now in the opening scenes and credits. I did another statue of Miss Nina Miglionico, first female attorney in the state of Alabama.
Look, not only could other people not deny his talent, he could not deny his talent. And that's the thing, when a gift like that has been given to you, nobody can beat it out of you. You can't give it away. You can't stop doing what you do. That's like asking a bird to stop flying. It's like a life force inside of you that you have no control over. And when your hands go to work on creating something, your hands just automatically know what to do.
I met Eddie Kendricks when I first went to Hollywood. I was about 17 when I met him. He was the first person to come down from the Motown headquarters upstairs on Sunset Boulevard to tell me that my work was good and I need to just relax and let things come to me because the work was that good, he said. I didn't know at that time, which would have been 50 years ago now, that I'd be doing a statue of Eddie Kendricks to honor him in Birmingham. But what it felt like, me being a big fan of Eddie Kendricks and the Temptations, it was an honor for me to just be asked to even try out in this contest that they were doing on people who could do the statues and ideas of the Temptation. They chose my design, my small maquettes or armatures.
Why are you the best artist to sculpt this statue that will honor Nathaniel Colley's legacy?
I feel that I'm the best artist to honor him because, like attorney Colley, I taught at Tuskegee, and he was a graduate at Tuskegee Institute at that time, which is now Tuskegee University. But it was an honor for me because I kind of felt a kinship to the project after reading and studying and doing research on him and reading all the great things that he's done for human rights, especially in the fair housing and HUD and different projects like that, that President John F. Kennedy appointed him or asked him to do back in the 60s. His accomplishments and achievements should be cast in bronze for those to see for generations to come. Right here in California, in the state of California. This is a special project for me. I've always wanted to do something for the state of California, from which I'm born and raised in. And this is my opportunity. It's like God's answering my prayers. This is something I wanted to do and hoping for all my life. We never know really what our future is going to be, but we keep laying seeds and you keep working, you keep doing what you have been put in the world to do. I always wanted to. Like I said earlier, I desire to do something for the state of California. And what project could be bigger than this? To do something honoring such a great human being, such as attorney Nathaniel Sextus Colley. And I just want to thank everybody that's participating and is giving their time and support to this project.
I just want to say, my art speaks for me. I don't like to talk a lot. So, sort of like my friend Michael Jackson, we didn't talk a lot. I like to just show my work and do what I can do to help others understand that there's love and peace still in the world today. So, thanks again for coming out. The room is packed. I'd like to see a packed house. This is a great thing. And Greg, thank you again so much for inviting me to be a part of this project.
And the Colley family for inviting him to be part of this project. Well deserved. This is, as you can see, this is his maquette for the big sculpture that we're trying to raise money to build, number one, okay? So please don't forget that this is a fundraising event. So if the spirit moves you, and I will say this, okay, honestly, if you stop and think about this whole event tonight, and you think about the spirit of Abraham Lincoln, the spirit of JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, that's the spirit of Nat Colley. And you got to believe that that's flowing through this room tonight like crazy, right? The spirit of Abraham Lincoln right here in Sacramento. He painted this picture just for this event, for you to come see and get the message of just how powerful this is. Thank you for being here, and thanks for the support.